So in this second hair masking tutorial, I've picked a more difficult image to work with. For example, the hair is very messy and there are some strands which are a lot darker than others and other strands which are very light, if not lighter than the actual studio background. And so this is going to require a different technique in order to extract the hair from the background. And for this, we're going to use calculations and alpha channels. And we'll be using the JPEG Hair Masking 2, which you'll find in your resources folder. However, before I do anything, I'll quickly point out something to you. If we go into the Paths palette, I have in fact already deep etched part of this image. And the areas that I've drawn around are around the hard areas of the body, around the shoulder, nice and deep inside the hairline, making sure that I don't have any of the studio background captured within the path. And then back to a very accurate path around those sharp edges of the body, the cheek, the ear, the shoulder and the arm and so forth. The first thing I'm going to do, if I go back into my layers palette, I'm going to create an alpha channel using calculations. And to do that, we have to go up to Image, Calculations, and this is our alpha channel. And what we need to do is create the greatest contrast between the blonde hair and the white background. Now in our calculations here we have two sources, source 1 and source 2. Now we only have one layer to work with at the moment, so under source 1 the layer is background, and of course in layer 2 the source is also background. Now remembering our RGB versus CMYK color chart, blonde hair or yellow is actually opposite of blue in the RGB or red, green and blue spectrum. So to create the greatest contrast, under our channels, rather than red we'll select blue, and under source 2 under channel we'll also select blue. And we can see that in our alpha channel, we've already created, just by doing that, a greater contrast between the hair and the background. Under blending, we just make sure we've got it ticked at multiply, and we click OK. Under channels, we can see that now we've created this new alpha channel down here. But we're not going to use this just yet. So I'm going to go back to RGB, come into my layers palette, and as with the previous hair masking technique, I'm going to duplicate my background layer by hitting Command J. Come down to my new layer icon here, click on that, and with a dark green as my foreground color, I'm going to dump my foreground into this layer by hitting Option Delete and drag this new layer underneath my duplicated layer. Come into my Paths palette and I'm going to Command click on my Path 1 to make a selection of my path, back into my layers, select layer 1 and I'm going to hit Add Layer Mask. And now we have a layer mask of those sharp edges of Rebecca's body. Now comes the slightly tricky bit. We're going to come back into our channels palette, click on our alpha channel, and we're going to exaggerate the contrast between the hair and the background even more. Now we have a few different ways of exaggerating the contrast between the hair and the background. One is to dodge and burn it to make the hair even darker, or we can just use levels. So Command L to bring up our levels and affect our alpha channel. And I'm going to slide my black point further to the right, which will darken this image even more. And if I drag the midtones along to the right, that's darkening it even more. But it's also darkening the very light areas. So I might just grab my white point here on the right hand side and drag this to the left, just to ensure that the white background stays white and isn't included in the mask. So that looks pretty good for now, and I'll click OK. Now this alpha channel is like a reverse of the mask that I want for my hair. I do in fact want the hair to be white and the background to be blacked out. So I can just hit Command I to invert this alpha channel, Command click on it to select it, come back into my layers, select my layer mask, B for my brush tool, 00 for 100% opacity, and just brush over those areas which are selected. Those munching ants are a little bit distracting, so I'm going to hit Command H to hide them. And you can see that this very messy hair has very quickly been included in my mask. But this mask is still far from perfect. You have these areas here on the right hand side which are still a little light, and the hair on the left here, which was a lot darker than the background, the mask is a little sharp and a little extreme. So the first thing I'm going to do is just paint in a little bit more of this hair on the right hand side. So with my invisible selection still selecting this hair, I'm going to just brush over these areas just to bring in some of that hair a little bit more. I might reduce the opacity of my brush a little bit so I don't overwork it. So I'll hit 3 for 30% and just go over these areas which are not quite coming through the mask just yet. Now I'm just going to zoom in on this little lock of hair which is running off to the right hand side here. If I switch off the green layer, we can see that that is in fact a solid chunk of hair which is running off. But however, because it's so white, or in fact lighter than the background, it hasn't been included at all. If I hit Command H, you can see that this marching ants are still active, but I'll deselect this selection by hitting Command D. I'm going to paint in some of this lock of hair. But before I do that, I'm just going to change my brush options. So I come up to my brush options right here. Yep, Shape Dynamics is ticked, which is good. It gives me this tapered edge effect to my brush stroke. And I'm going to run the brush over this lock of hair here just to bring it in. Reduce my opacity of the brush a little bit by hitting the 1 key to bring it down to 10%. So I can be very delicate along these edges here and just continue painting in this lock of hair. That will do for now. I'll just work a little bit on the top of the head here. And now for this little lock of hair which is running off to the left hand side here. Back down to 10% opacity just for the delicate end of the lock of hair. And just a few little finishing touches to some other stray hairs. Command 0 to fit to window. So far we've done a pretty good job of extracting all this hair, this light coloured hair from the background. However, if I look at the hair on the left hand side here, it's fairly harsh. It's a fairly harsh mask. And I wouldn't mind softening that a little bit. So I have a very cool little trick to use, and that is to get onto our lasso tool with the L key. Now up here on the left hand side, under the lasso options, under feathering, under feather I want to bring it right up to maybe a feathering of about 40. I want to make a selection of that area which is bugging me, which is a little extreme. And with my layer 1 mask selected, I'm going to bring up my curves by hitting Command M. Now in my quarter tones, which is right up here in the far right hand side here, I want to bring this in by pulling it down. And if you look at the hair on the left hand side, you'll see that the mask has become a lot softer. It's not quite as extreme. And that's because as we pull this quarter tone down, we're tightening the mask around the hair. Now if I toggle on and off the preview button, before and after, the effect is subtle, but it's a definite improvement. And I'll click OK. Command D to deselect. So that's how you can mask out difficult hair from its background using calculations and alpha channels.